Okay, and now I'm turning on the Zoom recording.
Okay.
Everyone ready?
Yeah.
I am your host, Michael Unterberg, here as always, remotely. Well, not always remotely, but here as always with my co-host, Alan Goldman, but this week remotely on Zoom. How are you, Alan?
Good, Baruch Hashem. You know, as best can be, I guess you would say, in these interesting times we're living in.
That's right. And joining us also via Zoom, we have our political expert, Rajel. How are you, Rajel?
Hi, how are you?
Okay, well, we're going
I'm
to
good.
help us catch us up with what's going on with forming the government. But in general, how are you doing in home, in the restrictions of being stuck in the house?
I'm actually fine. It was quite hard to get used to this in the first days, but I'm quite liking it. Like,
Oh yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, I have kids, and I started like a routine. I'm working almost normally, so we just split times between me and my husband, and that's it. We're finding out some very creative way to deal with the situation.
Awesome.
And once we figured it out, so we're trying to enjoy it as much as we can.
Yeah. What?
How are you doing?
Yeah, thank God. You know, trying to figure out what this is all about, and what's going on, and what are the implications. And you know, I have older kids, so you know they get up around. You know, 1 is pretty early for them to get up. You know.
It is hard, but I'm glad we are living in a country that took the challenge seriously and created the rules. And I'm glad we live in a society where most people, the vast majority of Israelis, seem to be following the rules.
I mean, I'll be honest, today I'm having a hard day. You know, you have good days and bad days. This whole mask thing, right? In Israel, we've just gotten the new not restrictions, the new
rules?
guidelines. Yeah, new guidelines, rules are that you have to wear a mask in public. And I had to go get my fish today for a Pesach. Excuse me. And the mask thing really got me. I don't know why. But
it doesn't have to be a reason why. So different things are hard and different, and we all have to get through it. You don't have to understand, I don't think, why this or that troubles you. But
yeah.
But like you say, we have ups and downs. Except for Rajel, who has only ups.
It's not. It's like, look at the things in a positive way. It's not that.
Right.
I don't want to stay like this my whole life, but
no,
we're trying to be positive.
I think you have the exactly right attitude. But as an old man, sometimes you do have to also validate, like, sometimes it just sucks. It does. Which is why we think it's important partially to keep the podcast going so that we can help not only to keep informed, which we do every week, but also so that there's a normal part for subscribers, for ourselves, for everyone to really have just part of the normal routines of life continue as much as possible. So when we got on this Zoom call, Alan and I were very confused about what's new in the news. And Rajel, you're on top of things. So from my perspective, basically what's happening is, after last week we announced that we're forming a government. It's a week later from the last time recorded. It's Thursday afternoon again. And there is no agreement to form a government yet. What is going on? Why is it we're so close? What's the holdup?
Well, still very close, but not. They didn't close anything yet. They said that this night they had negotiation the whole night. They didn't sleep at all. They were negotiating via Zoom as well. So they also have these challenges.
Well, some of them are in quarantine. Yeah. Some of them have
a lot of them. And maybe to update you that also the Minister of Health has the coronavirus, which is very ironic in these cases. It is ironic.
And it's also problematic that because he's a Haredi, he doesn't have a computer or a smartphone.
I don't know.
So he's doing everything by his. That's true. That was reported.
Yeah,
the health ministry is looking into wiring him up now so that he can function his job, because right now he's doing everything by landline phone
he
call.
Will have.
But also because
computer, I think.
They have
also
to.
Because he being the in the health ministry, he was in contact with all of the top players who are dealing with this crisis and the pandemic. They've all gone into quarantine, including the Prime Minister, the Director General of the Health Ministry, so on and so forth. So it's pretty.
It's challenging.
Anyway, we're interrupting.
No, you're not. It's part of the same thing. They're always trying to. They ask me a question: how can you explain the politics in Israel without speaking about the corona? So I cannot do it. It's impossible. It's things happening at the same time, and and both things are influencing both of the processes. So I cannot do it. But in the meantime, this night they had a lot of. They negotiated and starting to close some things. One of the most important issues here is who is going to be the Minister of Justice. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they don't want it to be someone from Kahol Lavan doesn't want it to be someone from Likud, actually. Specifically, blue and white. They want to have that ministry, and it's something that it sounds very logical because they want to hold and to try to equilibrate as much as possible all the legal issues that were going on now, including Benjamin Netanyahu legal issues. So that was one of the main points in order to close the negotiation. And I don't know, the media says, not a politician, the media says that they might be closing that point, giving the ministry to Avi Nissenkorn, who is from Blue and White, and he used to be the head of the Union of Workers here in Israel. So he understands some things about justice and about the law in this country, and he's also a lawyer.
Rachel, why did you put in that caveat that that's according to the media? Why did you stress that?
Because it's not official yet. The word in here is itachen, like supposedly. How do you translate it? But it's not closed yet. It's not something that's official yet. Most likely, that's what that's the word.
How does the media know about these internal discussions going on behind closed doors?
I think the politicians. I don't think that's what the politicians do. They send some messages to the media because the negotiations are closed, and I don't know if someone infiltrated the negotiation. I don't think so. They just send some messages to the media. So also to have the people to be informed about what is going on, because it's part of our right as our citizens understanding what is going on with that negotiations. And I think the media also make the effort to, and they push to the politicians in order to tell them what is happening there. That's why they will not say that it's something official, but that's what they are negotiating in this moment. Okay,
are the politicians also using those media leaks as tactics to get pressure to influence the negotiation itself? Like it's a.
Of course, that is this game that we are always hearing, and of course, I think the media also wants. I think, according to their own interests, for example, to the Minister of Justice, I think they also want to have some equilibrium in those cases. But I don't know. That's another huge issue about media and politics that we should speak about that in other occasion, because it's so interesting and it's so influential. And also one of the legal cases of Benjamin Netanyahu has to do with this relationship between media and politics. So it could be very interesting to speak about it. But another point that was very important to close in order to have the negotiation, to deal with this negotiation, was who is going to be the president of the Knesset, the speaker of the Knesset. That's how you call it in English. Why is so important? Because in the last year, for example, and more than that, the Likud, with Yuli Edelstein being the speaker of the Knesset, actually they control some of the processes inside the Knesset. The speaker of the Knesset has some power to, not to control entirely, of course, but to have some control of how the debate will look, or who will control the main, like who will control the agenda, for example. So they can have some more influence in how the Knesset
agenda
is working.
Of what's discussed in the Knesset?
That's right. So they can have some, and also even how many times we have every member of the Knesset to speak in the plenary. Like they have some control, and for the last month specifically, Kahol Lavan, Blue and White were asking for a legislation in order to change the Speaker of the Knesset. By the end, we see what happened last week. I don't know if you spoke about it, that by the end, the most symbolic way to understand that Benny Gantz is going with the Likud to a unity government is that he actually, they passed that law to change the president of the Knesset, and he is now the Speaker of the Knesset.
Right.
Like, it's temporary, of course, but so.
Right. If you look at it in terms of power struggle, right, or whatever, power balance. So if you have, right, there's the parliament with the Speaker of the Knesset is in charge of the Knesset, so he has that power, some certain powers under it, and to the head of the government, right, the prime minister has the executive branch, even though in Israel it's a little bit more complicated because they're combined, but in some sense there's a balance of power there.
And as we explained last week, the equivalent in the States would be in the House. Okay, we should write that down that time. I don't know how to do that right now. Can you take a note of that time? Thank you. In the States, the equivalent would be to the Speaker of the House in the House and the Majority Leader in the Senate. They control the conversation. They control what issues are debate. They control what's going to be voted on. They control what's going to be discussed. So, in a sense, it feels passive, but it's actually it's a very strong power. They get to control what the legislator deals with.
But the issue here in the Knesset and in the parliamentary system that we have is that he's also a member of the Knesset and he's also a member of the party. Mm-hmm. Like, he's one of the 120 members. Mm-hmm. And he has the same, he still has the same power of other members of the Knesset, but we have to include that he's a speaker. So it's kind of confusing these checks and balances between powers in Israel when the executive and the legislative, it's part of the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important to balance it between different parties or between opposition and coalition. But in this case, the Speaker of the Knesset has to be part of the coalition. So
now they're arguing about
who's
going to hold that chair going forward.
Well, they spoke about it, and the Likud might have it, and they're speaking about, most likely, as you said, Yariv Levin being this guy. Yariv Levin was the head of the coalition when we had a coalition a year ago. And he's a very active politician. He's the real politician. He's the one who led all the coalition negotiations in the last 2 elections. Not very successfully, but he was dealing.
That's not great on your resume, yeah.
He was part of the team, and he could manage this good. He knows the Knesset very, very, very good. He was part also of the commission of the Knesset. He understands how the Knesset works. So he might take this position. And the other big issue is about what is going to happen regarding the sovereignty when we speak about the Palestinian territories. Continuing with this whole deal of the century from Trump, like, what's going to happen with this topic, with this issue? In Kahol Lavan, Blue and White, they don't necessarily have the same ideas or the same plans that the Likud have. So they have to get into an agreement and to understand how the coalition will look like regarding this, or regarding the decision that we'll have to take with this issue.
So here's my stupid question. Why can't they make the government come to an agreement, now we have a government, and then fight about what to do about the West Bank? Why does that have to be, why is that holding, if they're basically agreeing on you said the 2 issues that were holdups that took a while were the Justice Ministry and the Speaker of the Knesset. Okay, so if we can come to an agreement, a compromise on those, why are they still not in agreement on the West Bank? Leave that to when you have a government. Why are you doing that now?
There's one important issue here. Speaking about the coalition accords. That's what it is. The coalition negotiation. It's something that is written down. It's like a contract. It's not something that you can say okay, and then change everything. You're signing a contract with the other ones. That's how the negotiations of the coalition works. By the end, you have to show and to actually publish this coalition accord. And in this case, everything has to be open.
Sure.
Many things you can close it like from behind, or some things will not be very, very open, but most of it has to be published, it has to be opened, and people will have to know what were the discussion about, what things you closed, and how we're going to actually take this into practice. Okay, so maybe you can change things, but it's not that easy to change a coalitionary agreement.
Well, that's why I'm sort of, in other words, they have to come to an agreement on who gets this job or who gets that job for the government to work, who gets this ministry, who gets that ministry. I get it. But when it comes to now, we're not agreeing on a specific policy. Okay, so you'll fight that out as part. That's once you have a functioning government. Go ahead. Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, I think we have to understand that the coalition isn't just a coalition between Likud and the Blue and White, right? There are a number of other coalition members. So Israel is not made up of two parties, as we always say. It's made of none parties. So even when we talk about a right-wing bloc, it's not really a right-wing bloc. It's a whole bunch of different parties that all have their own agendas. And for the last year, they have gone very heavily with Netanyahu, and they've stuck with him through thick and thin, and brought him, at least to the point we are. Maybe not over the finish line, but at least to the finish line. And one of these parties, at least, right, is the New Right. And that's that in and of itself, the New Right is a combination of smaller parties.
No, Yamina is a combination.
Yamina.
Yeah. Yamina. Sorry. Yamina.
New Right is one of the smaller.
Right. See how confusing it is?
It's very confusing.
and they along with a decent amount of Likud Knesset members have a certain ideology that they have been pushing for the last decade, which comes under what we talked about, the judicial, West Bank, and all these things. And they don't want to see that now thrown out when they feel like they've made huge steps, and it could be all unraveled if the Blue and White get too much of their ideology in, let's say, right? To put a stop on what was called the judicial revolution in Israel, or annexation. And it's not clear where Blue and White holds on annexation, or at least Benny Gantz, because they were very parv about it during the election. They weren't necessarily anti the whole Trump, but they weren't necessarily embracing either. So, Rachel, you wanted to say something?
That's interesting that you spoke about Blue and White ideology.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how to answer that question about what's actually the ideology of Blue and White. We have people from all over.
Don't feel
right,
bad. Neither can they.
Yeah. So actually, the question about the other parties, what is going to happen with Yamina, with the ultra-Orthodox as well? They were naturally the bloc that Netanyahu had in the last years, actually. And now the big question is, okay, what is going to happen with those? For example, the Ministry of Education. Who wants to have the Ministry of Education? Normally, Yamina wants to have it, and now Yamina has that ministry, but it's part of negotiation as well. But why? Because they are speaking about Yuli Edelstein having this ministry.
They were speaking about Miri Regev.
The speaker of the. I heard about the, how do you call the internal security? The like Miri Regev will be the, how do you call that ministry in English?
Internal security.
Internal security.
Homeland security.
Maybe Homeland security. I don't know. It
I
sounds
guess.
very American.
That's American for it.
Yeah, but she was asking for that ministry, if I'm not mistaken. But now maybe Yuli Edelstein will have that ministry. But
Alec,
again,
now that
we're
posting
not
these
sure.
on YouTube, people can see your reactions.
Oh, right.
No, we're not seeing your reactions. I'm not seeing it. I'm just seeing Michael.
Oh, really?
Because I'm in a speaker mode. Okay, that's
okay.
It's fine. So yeah, so that's the big question. What is going to happen with the other parties, and if that will be one of the elements that will avoid closing the government quicker. What the other parties are expecting to have, like.
Yeah, I'm used to. That everybody wants that in order to get the group to agree to be in the coalition, there's a real give and take. Both these two parties each want education. So how do we work that out? That's the hard compromise. And at the end of the day, they have to, well, we'll give it an education, but then we want this and that. I'm used to. What you guys are telling me is that we have and maybe you're saying this isn't so unique, but you're saying that the right-wing bloc is saying, look, Bibi, we've stuck with you through thick and thin. Now you're saying because of the corona crisis, you want to make a unity government and bring in the center left. Okay. And that means giving them control of issues that we think are important. Okay, we get it, there's a crisis, but there's a policy issue that we want to guarantee that we won't compromise on. If you're handing over some control to blue and white, the center left, we as the right wing will stick with you if you promise us that you're not going to go back on this principle of policy. So they're making it a condition of agreement. It's not necessarily part and parcel of the coalition negotiation, but they're saying we'll agree to these other compromises if you guarantee us on this policy issue, you'll stay with us.
It is part of the coalition agreement. It goes in the contract of what they have to vote for or not.
Right, but
I think we should also point out that it's not just blue, that blue and white itself split up, as we said last week, was happening.
Right.
But also Labor and Gesher,
Yeah.
which are the left of that blue-white coalition, are
also have representation
joining in, and some other, right? There's been a lot of movement there in crazy Israeli politics, and you know they so it may be hard to understand blue and white's ideology, since blue and white now is really just the Chosen Israel party, which is
but they're keeping the name blue and white.
They took the name.
They took the name blue and white, but that was Benny Gantz. But Yair Lapid and Boogie Alon, they left.
Yeah.
Right. So now you have Benny Gantz's party, which was unclear what the ideology is for whatever. But you do have long stalwarts in labor who have very clear ideology, who are very potentially coming in. Amir Peretz's ideology is very well known. As a leftist.
I understand the right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying how normal is that? And I guess I'm not articulating my point clearly enough. What I'm saying is there's the debate over how to form the coalition itself. And then there's policy guarantees that need to be made so that we'll agree to be in the coalition. I'm seeing them, maybe that's my brisker brain, I'm seeing them as two different aspects of coalition formation. One is we have to agree on the actual membership of the government, who's going to be doing what. And then we have to have this policy guarantee made beforehand before we move forward.
Correct.
There
are two categories, but they're both just as important potentially.
Yeah, but one big question here is also you have to take decisions in two ways: in the long term or in the short term. If you want a long-term government, so you also have to agree in those issues now. If not, every change or every context that can change this agreement will very, very quickly turn down this government. So I think personally that this new government they're trying to conform, it will not take a lot of time, like it will not last a lot. Okay. In Israel we know that governments don't last a lot. There's like the average is 1.9 years. So it's crazy how
for the whole life of the state.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's something that I read like I don't know when, but yes. And
but that's because the last year has thrown things off.
Well, but also
but
also the last 30 years. Very rarely have we come to a complete 4 years.
No, 4 years, even not 3.
Right.
2
or 3. Yeah.
And we also had governments from 1 year in the past. So the big question is, if you're looking for a stable and long government, so this is not the way it's going to happen, I think.
I don't think anybody really has any illusion that it's going to last very long.
It's a crisis.
And
it's a crisis.
And that's why they're calling it. They're calling it an emergency government, like they have it before the 6-day war started. They created a unity government, and they call it the emergency government. In Hebrew sounds better, like Memshelet Cherem, which is emergency government. Which we have a crisis, we have to deal with it, and we have to have a political consensus. So that's a tragedy that they have to have now. The issue is what will happen after the crisis is finished. And the main issues will be the issues that we talk about, like the thing with the negotiations with the Palestinians, the sovereignty, and those issues that normally also break coalitions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say to them, maybe make the and this is just me talking on a podcast, so who cares? But I would say maybe make the agreement, we're going to freeze and not take any major steps on these issues until this crisis subsides, so that will create a stable emergency government, which sounds funny. But during the emergency, let's freeze on those issues so that we don't split apart. And then we'll deal with them again afterwards.
So, well, because I think they're not. I mean, they're playing with the idea, and this is like, is it an emergency government or is it a unity government? And part of the problem for that, I think part of the problem with your suggestion, Mike, is that the hardcore of the agreement is it's going to be a shared prime ministership throughout the whole 4 years, right?
Right.
A year and a half, it switches over to Benny Gantz. That's the illusion. Like very few people really believe it's going to happen, but at least they're pretending that, and that's the argument. So if to call it an emergency government, that we're only gonna that was one plan, that for 6 months we'll get together, we'll get through this, but that's not what they're doing. They're making a whole coalition for 4 years, and part of that is that Benny Gantz will become prime minister in a year and a half. So why they chose that route over the other route,
that's what I'm worried about.
Why.
There's the Israeli expression, tafasta merubah lo tafasta. If you try to grab too much, you end up with nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm worried. I very much agree with the idea that during a crisis, you have to have unity, and you have to have government, and you have to have a functional system. So that's my concern. Look, if it works, if they come to an agreement, right. But if not, and we're back to chaos in the middle of a crisis.
I think they will close. I'm always very positive, and I don't want to hear the last podcast that I said that we're going to, like, my predictions are not always good. I said that we're going to fourth election before the Corona thing, but I hope that this prediction will not be real by the end. But what I think is that before Pesach, or maybe during Pesach and Cholamot, they will close something, because it's ridiculous, as you said, Michael. They have to close something. We are having a huge crisis. Yeah. Half of the economy. I just heard a report of the unemployment. Yes, we have a million. We have a million people unemployed in Israel. Never happened. 20%. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. It's a lot of people will not have a job, and the economic crisis will be huge to deal, besides the health crisis. And even that we feel as Israelis, and in comparison with other countries, that the government is doing a good job, we still have to understand that it could be better. Some analysts said that we took the coronavirus guidelines. We started a little bit late, just because of the elections and just because of political issues. So it really influences how the crisis deals. So
we've also been very good about home restriction, but we haven't been very good about testing, which is South Korea was the most.
Yeah, no.
So Israel's not.
That's right.
Israel's not hasn't handled it perfectly. It's just overall. Yeah.
No, there's also other analysts who said, because of politics, we should, like, by the beginning of this crisis, even the army and the security forces have to take the control of the crisis, not the government and politics. Some people are saying that, specifically like security analysts, and they say that they didn't do it because of politics, because they wanted to be present and to be every night and speak to the people and to be the face of the crisis, and also the face of how the crisis is being controlled. I don't know what they think about this, but
it's a little scary.
Politics.
Yeah, go ahead.
But politicians play politics. That's their job. I'm not
right,
so sure.
That's right.
I'm not so sure I'd feel so like happy with the military taking over either the crisis. Like,
you'd be happy.
You know,
look, that's what
it doesn't. The military doesn't have to do everything. What?
So that's the fall of the Roman Republic, when you hand over to the chief of the military control the country, because democracy is chaotic, and in a crisis you can't have it. So then you hand away democracy. That's not it wouldn't be the first or second or third time that's happened in history. So that's why I'm going to choose to be optimistic now and say that it's going to work out well, because the alternatives are. Not good?
I would definitely bet on it. I'm definitely pretty confident that they're going to come to some agreement. But I also agree with Rajel that, I mean, I think once we get past like, you know, I don't know what it means to get past this crisis, because nobody really knows what the
Right.
meaning of it all is. But when we
year
get to a
and a
certain
half.
point, the government will probably, you know, fall apart then.
Okay.
But see,
Then back
yeah, I
to,
think I'm not,
you know, look, back to the dysfunction of malpractice that we need to get past. Anyway, those problems are still waiting. But
right.
but one of the things that politicians have, look, in general, we're in an age where partisanship is interrupting the good performance of government in many countries, and Israel is not immune to that. Okay, true. But in a time of crisis, you have to be able to say, this is where we don't do that. This is where we go back to the old way, which is we understand that whatever our partisan divides are, they can't hold us apart and prevent us from functioning. That compromise has to be achieved in order to function.
Yeah. No, and actually the way Benny Gantz behaved, that he actually broke down his own party and left the party, that's one of those compromises. He said maybe it will have a political cost or anything that he promised to the other parties. I don't know. But he understood that he has to compromise because of the crisis, not because of other things. I think that, or maybe it was only a way to running away from the other parties, that he was also strong in Miguel to hold it together. So maybe this was only an opportunity that he saw, and that's the way he decided. But he compromised a lot in order
I agree with you. I think
to make this work.
You're saying there may be other internal considerations, fine. But overall, he came to the decision, which is, look, I'm going to have to sacrifice what I ideally want for the reality that we have to find a way to work together. And I think I am arguing, and I think we here agree, that that's the model. He's getting attacked from his left, that many on his left, that he's doing the wrong thing. Bibi's being attacked by many on the right, that he's not doing the right thing by compromising. But I think the three of us agree that that's exactly, look, in general, I think we think that compromise is healthier, finding ways to work together than to split apart. But here in a time of crisis, I think it's not optional. I think it's a necessity. I think that's what we're agreeing. Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Yeah.
Rachel,
let's see. Maybe in a couple of hours things will change. I don't know.
I hope so. If it doesn't work, Rachel, I'm nominating you to be in charge. You'll run the show, and then we'll be in much better shape.
No. That's all. People say, why you don't get into politics? I like to analyze politics from the outside, not from the inside. I don't want to become a politician for now. I don't know.
Yeah. No, we're educators. We like to look from the outside and explain, and first understand, then articulate.
Yeah, and educate, of course.
And not keep. We don't want our hands on the steering wheel. Yep.
No.
The old problem.
Not for now.
All right. Well, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you for inviting virtually.
Oh, so helpful. Super helpful. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mike. And
thanks in advance. We're going to send these audio files to Ben, who will help make them sound better. So thank you, Ben, in advance. That's the end of the episode. Bye-bye. And I stopped the recording.